Добрий день, друзі. Я вас
Good afternoon, dear friends. Welcome here at the Ukraine Media Center. And our next briefing today will be with people who managed to get out almost from hell, from towns and villages in Kyiv province which have been shelled the most over the recent weeks. So I would like to introduce to you this family, Elena Shapashnik, Mikhailo Davidenko, and their little daughter, Eva. Literally yesterday, this family evacuated from Brovary district, namely from village of Shevchenkova. So please tell us your story, where you were when the war started and what was happening and how you managed to get out of that hell. Into the microphone if possible. We haven't managed to get out of there from the very first time. There were several convoys coming there, but they did not reach us, and finally yesterday we were lucky. Maybe some people are still staying there. Many people, some people don't know that there would be those convoys. It was terrible because, you know, they just started immediately shooting at people who were distributing humanitarian aid in our village. Please keep your microphone closer. Yeah, they shooted at two people, a woman of my age and the husband, her husband, and they started shooting at them immediately, and it was impossible almost to get their dead bodies, and they stayed there in the car for 2 days. We have no one shop left. They take everything from there. Even there are things which seem to be something they would not need, but still they take them. We were told that there will be an evacuation convoy, and we went there in such a way that they would not see us. We reached that place and got onto the buses and started moving, and police helped us. Police are like superheroes for our children. My child is 3 years old and shouting, "I will become a policeman, I will become a cop." The police helped, they came and placed us and provided food to our children and ourselves. Thank them so much. But we are now waiting for other people of our village to be evacuated, because it's terrible. They have no electricity, nor gas, nor food. All that humanitarian, you know, they destroyed the village council and took everything, stole everything from there, those Russians. How we learned that there will be evacuation? We have our village group, and we were told there that there would be a convoy, so if you want to evacuate, go there. But you know, not everybody knows. There are some pensioners who are not on those internet groups. They don't have those smartphones. So not everybody can get out of the basement to run there and tell them in person and get them. Because those Russians, they run, you know, across backyards, courtyards, you know. People are cooking food and they come with assault rifles, hands up and so on, and people don't have food mostly. Yeah, there is no natural gas nor electricity, and people are even scared of using fire to cook some food. There is a situation which we never thought we would have. It's very terrible to think about our children. We are glad to see you in safety. Mikhailo, maybe you'll add something. Eva, how are you? As my wife said, you know, they are just cruel people, that's it. You know, they're mostly children, like 18 years old, 20 years old, and they point at our children with their assault rifles. You know, they also have parents, maybe their parents are worried about them, but we are worried about our children. Thank you. Thank you. Stay strong. Dear friends, dear journalists, if you have any questions, you now have an opportunity to ask those. No questions? You're welcome. I'm Viktor Melnikov, CGTN. Could you please tell us, those military people, did they address you in any way? Were they brutal, or how they spoke with you? Like, how it went? How did they get food from you? How it happened? It just, you know, we had people who, there were some local people who helped them. Some locals told them what is where, who is doing what, and they would, those Russians would go to that place on purpose. They already knew. So some locals would, help them. The Russians bombed some food shops, and there's vodka from those shops, and they would give a bottle of vodka to some locals, and those locals would help them. Yeah, several people would just surrender for the whole village. Did you see how they behave with other people and with you? Like, did they tell you anything, or they just kept silence? They did not tell anything to me personally, but we have people with us, and those people were brought by Russians to their homes in person. When they were cooking food, Russians forced them into their homes under the assault rifle. Those people can tell their stories. And again, 2 little children, 2 boys and their parents, the lady and her husband, and food was taken from them, and they were forced into their home, into their house under the assault rifles. They are waiting to tell you their story, how Russians forced them. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Stay strong. Please. Also a question?
Прошу вас. Запрошую вас, прошу. Зараз я вам представлю.
Now I will introduce to you our ladies, our females who escaped Irpin, Bucha district, Lyudmila Pershin and Alexander Dodorenko. You have the floor. Please share our stories with you, where you were when this war started and what was going on. Well, when the war started on the 24th of February, before that I was ill for several days. I didn't sleep well in the night time. I had a fever, high temperature, and at 5:37 on the 24th of February, I heard some explosions. Initially, I could not even imagine that we have that war, but when I took my phone in my hands, I saw that literally a couple of minutes ago my friend called me from Irpin. I see several missed calls because the sound was off on my phone. And I called him and he said, do you know what's going on? And he told me that some cities have been being bombed. Again, I went to social networks and saw that indeed the war had started. Now we live in the residential complex not far from the city center. During the first day, people from our residential block and other streets were panicking. They were leaving on a mass scale, and there were traffic jams on all roads because everybody was trying to leave, and maybe 70% of people left on the first day. We spent the first night with our daughter at our home, but when after the first day of that war, our residential complex was the first one in Irpin which was hit by the enemies, and it was hit in such a way that at the car parking lot it was hit and windows were destroyed, and that heating insulation of the building was broken, and one car was completely destroyed and 7 other cars damaged in that parking lot, and not a lot of residents stayed there. It was a powerful explosion. When we heard it first, there was a strong vibration across the house. But we were in our apartment, our flat, and we didn't think that our courtyard has been hit. I looked to the right side, to Kyiv, and everything seemed to be quiet. Then I looked on the left side and I saw people running. We started looking for fire extinguisher. We started using sand to eliminate that fire because there was that fuel from that power substation, and the gas pipe was broken. We called for emergency services. That time they were working. Now they don't work anymore in Irpin, and the electricity was cut off and the natural gas supply was cut off. And while we were removing the consequences of what happened and speaking with emergency services, part of our residents were already collecting their chattels and leaving our residential complex, and also from the neighboring residential complex. We could not stay there anymore without water, without a natural gas. I called Oksana Mitroshina, who lives in a private house, and we went there to spend the night there. I thought, okay, we would just spend one night there and then we would get back. But for the whole next day, there were strong explosions every now and then. And then when we were going to go, Oksana said, let the child stay here and you can go. And since that time we are together. We have this big extended family of 9 people. We spent all that time with Oksana in her private house, and during the first days we learned about the schedule of their firing. It started at 5:30, 5:40, and during the whole day there were powerful explosions, shelling from different types of weapons, and we could hear, is it that they hit us or is it that our guys are shelling? We tell one sound from the other. It started at 5:30, 5:40, and it ended after the midnight, between midnight and 1 a.m. And during that time, after that, you could sleep for maybe 4 hours, but sometimes there would be some individual explosions. But the most terrible time was from 5:30, 5:40 to 1 a.m. The most terrible part started when they started shelling that district where we are located. Every morning we would wake up and we would hear some explosions. We would spend time in the basement. We would spend nights in the basement. We go outside and we see that one neighboring house is destroyed. Next day, 2 more houses are destroyed. Just those wires dropped there. And then a 9-story building was shelled, and we saw it. We were not in the basement, and we heard a powerful explosion, and that building was 9-story building was 150 to 200 meters from us, and we saw the explosion. They were shelling that building on purpose. We went to the basement, and there were neighbors staying next to us, and they, like us, were thinking that soon there will be victory, soon it will be quiet. But instead, every day it would become worse and worse. And we evacuated from Irpin on the 10th of February. 1 week before that, the electricity was cut off. At the same time, mobile communication stopped working and internet stopped working. No internet access anymore. Next day, water supply was cut off and natural gas was cut off, so we stayed in information vacuum and without any communications. And that was the most terrible. Not so much lack of those utilities, but the lack of connections. We didn't know whether our city is occupied. My friend worked for an evacuation staff, and we found a place in our balcony where it was possible to connect to Kyiv Star Network somehow and send a text message. And there was a text message. Our friend told us that he left the city. Patriots like us who helped a lot in the city, they all wanted to stay in the city till the very last end. And now we know that a lot of people have already left the city. We didn't know that it has been occupied by invaders. And we got the first text message, and our friend told us, don't leave your building, don't leave, don't go to the streets, because everything around Central Park is covered with dead bodies. We now knew that situation is bad. Next day, our friend told us that there are no authorities in the city. The authorities have left, and the city has been occupied by invaders, and it's very dangerous in the city. And so we stayed in the information vacuum. We have quite a big group of people. We had 4 pensioners with us, and every day it became more and more difficult. And then every time we would decide what to do, and we could not leave because the only transportation route was through the city of Stoyanka, and people used it to flee, to evacuate using their cars, but now it has been occupied by enemies. So all routes from the city were bombed, were closed, and there was no way to leave the city. And when the 10th of February came, we had one pensioner with us. He is an advanced user and in terms of technology, and he had a small Wi-Fi router, and he somehow got connected, and he said, girls, we have Wi-Fi connection. I'd like to add that, you know, mobile phones get discharged, but we had a car battery, and we used it for charge our phones. I can show you some photos, some pictures how we survived, but now I'll finish my story. We got that Wi-Fi router, and we started, like, you know, like hungry people. We started reading those news, like being hungry for news. We were in the information vacuum. We didn't know what's going on in the city. And then we read that our district has been completely occupied by enemies, by invaders, so it's dangerous to leave the building. And now we see a message that in the morning, since this morning, a green corridor is open. And we saw that seems that this green corridor has been working for more than 1 hour. We contacted the police, and the police said, this is your last chance to leave the city safely. So we asked them, could we use our own car, because we have 4 pensioners, we have 2 dogs, we have a disabled person with us, and 2 cats, so we could only live in cars. And we were told there was some clarification that it's safe to use a bus, but cars can be shelled. maybe shelled, and we decided to evacuate. We, as a group, we were told it's your risk if you decide to go by car. So we quickly collected our chattels. Well, not chattels, all we have is one training suit, and that's it. We don't have any suit, and we haven't even managed to get all the documents with us. We got in the cars, and we went to the city center to the designated address for evacuation start, and there was a convoy, and we spent about 2 hours waiting there. There were lots of buses, and when we started, there was a convoy about 1.5 kilometers long, and we passed Irpin more or less normally. We left Irpin, and there was a turn to Stoyanka, the only road which is still works, but it has been occupied by invaders, and we saw broken enemies victims and broken already, and we don't know whether we will be let go or not. And we saw a lot of cars in front of us and behind us, and we already saw the first roadblock of the enemies in front of us, and there was some pause, some break. Some people would leave their cars for a call of nature, and I also left the car, and I saw a red jeep, and it was shooted, and I saw that everything is covered. There's blood in that car, and there was no one person in that car, no one driver. And next to that road there were 3 cars shooted, 3 cars in line, and no one dead body, but some person from a private building there approached us and started talking to people. It turned out that he lives next to that place, and he said, when people were shooted here, I managed to bury some part of those people, and in these 3 cars there were females only, and I digged one grave, and I buried several females there, and when I got back, he said, somebody stole my shovel. And that's an interesting story about those females. When we already reached the peaceful, safe territory, I typed the text message that everything's fine now, we already left the territory, and some lady from Bucha wrote a comment to me saying, thank you for writing this, people have to know it, but I would like to ask you, maybe you have some information. In those 3 cars you saw, we were shooted there, we were in those cars. So now we are safe, but my mother body is there, and my mother-in-law in green jacket is there, and my mother in pink jacket is there. Maybe you saw them, maybe you know something. And I replied, you know what, there is a guy living there in a private building. He has a big black dog, and he's one of the few people staying there because there is an enemy's roadblock. You can ask that person, that guy, where he buried those dead bodies. And after I wrote that comment, the same evening, my friend from Irpin wrote to me, sent me a private message, may I call you? I said no, because I have a lot of people there sleeping now. And he sent me a screenshot of my comment, and he said, this is my security guard who is guarding my house, working for me, and that's my dog. And he sent me a picture of that guy, of that guard and that dog. And then I sent a private message to that lady, and she was very thankful, but it's impossible to get those dead bodies from there. After we are liberated from occupation, we would be able to rebury those bodies. About the roadblock, we stayed a lot of time at that roadblock, and the night time started, and we didn't know whether we would be shooted or they would let us go, or we would have to make a U-turn. It was a lot of tension. Also, we had those pets with us, and we could not let them out. And when we reached the first roadblock, Oksana was driving the car, and their husband, a disabled guy, was in his car, and my daughter and 2 pensioners were in that car. And they would let Oksana go, but we were still staying behind that roadblock, and there was yet another car in front of us, and we didn't know what would happen after that. We saw that nothing moves. We let Oksana go, and we were just staying there very nervous. And I said, I told all those people in our car, maybe I would approach those bastards and talk to them quietly. I would not argue with them. I would just ask them to let us go to reach our other car. And there was no mobile connection, and they didn't know that I left the car. And I left the car, I approached them, and then Oksana also approached them a bit later, because we spent a long time there. And they said, they have 3 roadblocks. The first one, then about 50 meters, they have another one, and then the controlling roadblock, which searches the cars and so on, is about 100 meters. ahead. And Oksana also approached them and talked to them, and the guy let 2 cars go, and they said, you will not be able any more. Either you get back to Irpin or you spend the night at this roadblock. And we had a big convoy behind us, and we spent the night at that roadblock. We asked them, how, if there is a call of nature, where could we go, or with a dog or whatever? You just stay next to your car, they said. And there was a difficult night with shelling and everything, and almost nobody would sleep in our car other than my child. And shelling started at about 9 p.m. and for the whole night. They would not shell at the convoy, but there was some shelling next to us all the time. And also, it was freezing in that night, and we didn't have a lot of fuel. We tried to save fuel because it was very cold, but 6:45, we saw those bastards, those enemies, and they started searching. They started searching the cars. They checking the cars, and no. I pressed the brake, and then the brake lights switch on, and we had to cover those lights with our jackets or whatever, because we covered all those lights. We think that they just wanted to sleep, and they knew that our guys would not shell at that roadblock because there is a convoy, and there was that convoy 1.5 kilometers long. So they were just shielding with innocent civilians, as we usually do. And then I want to say something about situation in Irpin after evacuation and when that occupation started, but they haven't got the whole of the city. They were at the border between Bucha, Warsaw, and Hostomel. Hostomel started, Hostomel was the first victim, then they invaded Bucha, and then they started moving towards Irpin. And we got used to that shelling, and we didn't respond, we didn't react anymore. And we used the battery cars, as Oksana said, to recharge our mobile phones, to have at least some connection. And then it started snowing, and we got that water, that melted snow from the roof, to at least wash our hands. And when the electricity was cut off, we realized that there would be no other utilities, no other communication. So I said, Oksana, we have to cook and stew that meat, to at least have some stewed meat. We would put it to the cold outside, at least to have some cold meat. But there, you have to understand, when you're in that territory, you don't want to eat. For the first 2 days, I didn't eat anything. I was just having coffee and water, coffee and water. During the next days, we started forcing ourselves to eat something, at least a couple of spoons of something, some meat, something, because you just don't want to eat there. When we left that place, we started eating at least something, because there you don't want and you just can't eat. You just have something in your throat and you cannot eat anything. About people living in Irpin, it's really terrible, because as our girl said, there was no communication with the authorities, no opportunity, no chance to learn about evacuation. People have their electricity cut off for more than 2 weeks, no way to recharge their phones, no internet access, so people cannot learn in time about the evacuation. That's the biggest problem, that people just stay in their basements, they wait for some assistance, and nobody can provide them with their assistance because it's too dangerous to come there, and they have no connection, no communication with the outside world. And there are still many addresses like that in Irpin, where neighbors came together, they cook on open stoves. For example, we have neighbors, they started living, and in 1 week somebody would go and they would bring us water, they would leave some eggs for us. And in the same way, people come together and join efforts to survive and waiting for assistance. Oksana, Ludmila, thank you. About enemy's roadblock, what they checked for, they forced males to remove their clothes, and if they found any patriotic picture on their skin, they would kill them immediately. It was terrible. All the time we heard shooting from assault rifles. We don't know how many bodies are there behind those roadblocks after that shooting. Also, there are a lot of mobile phones there. They take mobile phones from people. They break those mobile phones. Well, about money, they didn't take that much money from people. Emotionally, I feel some guilt or something, because we had a neighbor, and that neighbor stayed there with his old grandfather. and that grandfather had multiple sclerosis, so that guy could not leave his grandfather. So he would lock his grandfather in the basement and go to a food shop to buy some food, and he is killed. So his grandfather spent 2 days in that basement, and then he left his basement. We didn't know about that, but we got a call from his children. We went there and we saw that the house is locked, but everything is broken there, and we tried to enter through the window to help that grandfather, because seems that that grandfather got a stroke. He didn't respond to any light or anything, and we couldn't even get him out of that house. He definitely needs some doctor. Maybe it would be possible to save him if providing medical assistance, but we were unable to provide medical assistance to that guy with a stroke, and we feel helpless. You cannot help the guy in any way. So you see, he doesn't respond to the light, so he probably died here. We just put him on his bed, and I always see it in my nightmares. Sorry. Thank you, Oksana. Thank you, Ludmila, for these stories. Thank you for sharing your stories with us. Maybe there will be some questions, but the whole world has to hear these stories.
I'm Tim Judah from The Economist and Financial Times from London. Can I just clarify, because I just want to clarify that you actually came from Bucha, is that right?
Ні, ми з Ірпінь.
Oh, we are from Irpin. We are from Irpin. Irpin and Bucha are two towns which are located next to each other.
You came from the bit where the Russians actually entered into Irpin, because most of Irpin...
Да, да.
So
Yes.
when the Russians came in, did they give any instructions to people there? Did they talk to people? Did they tell you what to do, or what?
Дивіться, ми
Look, we did not see them because we stayed in our basement, and we personally didn't see any Russians in person in our street. The only thing we knew was that they're somewhere in our district, but the other part of our district, there are a lot of residential blocks, multiple-story residential blocks, Synergy residential complex, Greentown, Fortuna, and other residential complexes, and they took hostages more than 140 persons in Green Yard residential block. And 2 or 3 days ago they were released, but they were kept for about 10 days, almost kept days. And there was raping of women. They were murders. They broke the doors, and people were kept in basement. Also, we personally, we did not see them in the city because we learn news every time when we managed to get some connection. We tried to learn how to evacuate, which streets we can use, and we learned it from the neighbors. In the nighttime, our neighbors, during the curfew, when it was prohibited, neighbors would try and go when the city was already occupied by Russians. Locals who know all those streets and routes, they knew how to get to Romanovka. Romanovka is a village which had been, that village was bombed, that bridge was, so people went there just walking, and on the other side of that bridge they were met and brought to Kyiv. So luckily we did not see Russians other than in Stoenka when already evacuating, when we reached and spent the night at their roadblock. I'd like to also tell you about one conversation we had at that enemy's roadblock when we were forced to spend the night there. One of those Russian invaders started some discussion or something, or some argument with one Ukrainian who was in our convoy with us, and they were saying that Crimea is ours, and what they are told on their TV that our Ukrainians are shelling over Donetsk and all those lies. Maybe they said, you're not told those things. We said, our guys said, we are told other things, that you are shelling us. And what he said, that Russian, do you think I wanted to go there? Do you want, I would like to be now with my wife, with my children at my home, but I have to be here because I'm in the military, and until now I have not killed any one person, and I hope that I will manage to get through this war without killing anybody. And we were a bit surprised with this. I also wanted to tell you about our morning. Our morning started, since we have 2 dogs and one dog is rather big, we had to get him to a walk. Every morning, you know, I have brought something. You see, our morning started with having these things. We collected them in our backyard. So these are fragments of mines. with which they were shelling. And 3 days between the evacuation, because before we left Irpin, the neighbor's house was hit and our windows got broken in our house. So every morning we would find these things in our backyard. And also the mine would hit the apple tree, and the apple tree was broken by the artillery cartridge, and there was a big pit there. Otherwise, if not for that apple tree, it would hit the building. If you have any other questions.
You mentioned something about hostages being taken. Can you tell us any more about that? And the previous people said that in their village that there were people who had helped the Russians. Did you see any of that?
Look, about your second question, I'll start with commenting on your second question about those people who helped the enemies in Irpin. I don't know such people in person, but I think that we had such people because I read something on internet forums, and there were pictures of some girls who helped the enemies. But among our friends, our neighbors, people we know, I don't know, I haven't heard about such cases. Now about your first question about hostages. This information was published on Facebook. If you search for Irpin residential complex Green Yard, you will see some posts with pictures. That's a huge residential complex with many 5-story buildings there in different colors. And those buildings were built in the last 5 to 7 years, and 95% of people living there are young families, and enemies were coming from Hostomel side and Warsaw side. There is a road which is very useful, very convenient for them, a road which makes a boundary between Irpin and Bucha. After they invaded Hostomel and Bucha and Warsaw, they saw Irpin, and that Green Yard is the first residential complex they saw from the Warsaw side. And there are pictures. I have some pictures where everything in that residential complex is covered, all backyards are covered with enemy's tanks. And people wrote that when Russians came to the territory, they took about 140 people hostages. And they kept them hostages for 7 to 10 days. I don't know for sure. And a couple of days ago, they wrote that they managed, there was no green corridor, but somehow those people were taken from the territory of that residential complex. Thank you. Any more questions? I'm Viktor Melnikov from CGTN. Could you please tell us about raping and similar things? Have you learned about them also from that internet group, or were you told by neighbors? We heard about them, and we even saw a picture. I think his last name is Bogdanov, and after there was that information about raping in Hostomel, there was such information about Pokrovsky residential complex and Green Yard residential complex. And then there was a picture published of that enemy, of that bastard. And in several days, information appeared, I think in Brovary or somewhere, that he was arrested by our military. So there has been this information. I think you can find it on social media, on Telegram channel. I had saw that information. Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming here, for sharing your stories with us. And we also have one more family who escaped the Vyshgorod district, village called Kazarovichi district, Kozarovichi, Kazarovichi. I will introduce the family, Elena Holovska, and next to her we see her son Alexander Sikorsky and their friends Andrei Kolesnik and Katerina Kravets. Could you please tell us our story? How you escaped, where you were since the beginning of this war, this invasion? Can you hear us? Yeah. So on the 24th of February, I had a day off. And we had our friend visiting us, and she told us that the war had started. And she opened our the basement for us. And only then we believed that, the next day we saw our tanks going to the zoo side, to Kyiv. A lot of tanks, and we were told, don't look there because they will start shooting, but we were just looking at them, hiding there. And of course, roads were damaged, and it was terrible to see it. And that night was sort of quiet, but then it was not quiet anymore. If there is no bombing if there is bombing in nighttime, then the day would be a bit quieter. And if there is bombing in the daytime, a night would be a bit quieter. But there would be bombing every now and then, and even some missile fell in our yard, backyard. Windows were broken, doors were broken. And the next house was brought to fire, and we were trying to fight that fire, and the next house with a shop was fired. There were Russians in Dmitriev, and they came there with tanks, and they used something, and they put that house to fire. And there were children living, 2 little children living in that house, a young family with a young couple with 2 children. Luckily, they were in the basement. Luckily, they were not in their house. When they tried to fight that fire, Russians told us, don't fight that fire, and they started shooting to the sky to prevent us from fighting that fire. But people managed to come from the other side and to try and stop that fire, to avoid that fire spreading to other buildings. And it was very terrible, and it's terrible now too. People are hungry, and there is no help. They keep crying, and also the water is coming to that village. And in Kazarevich, in Dmitriev, there is a lot of water approaching the people's houses. Also, I would like to tell you how we were moving on the 8th of March. On the 8th of March, it's like this. On the 6th or 5th of March, we were told we should evacuate. I didn't go because my children was with some other girl in Kazarevich. I said I will not leave because my child would come here, would come to Dmitriev, and it will be terrible for the child not to see her parents. And so we were staying there just waiting for our child, and we were praying, may God help us, because that was very terrible. We didn't even go to the basement anymore because we didn't have windows anymore in our, we just covered our windows with some film, and we were staying at home, just hearing everything, hearing the aircraft. Like when the Russians were walking across our houses and checking and looking for who informs about their locations, and they were looking for mobile phones, and we were told to hide our mobile phones because Russians would check mobile phones. They would walk across houses and check who provides information about them. Some people were hiding in basements. We had neighbors with a small child, with a little child, and as soon as they would be able to leave, we said, you have all your family there, go there and join your family. And the child, and she said, she said, I'm here because my child is in Kazarevich. But thank God, on the 7th of March, we, with my husband, I didn't know where to go. Should we go to Kazarevich? But it was also impossible because of constant bombing. And then those Russians would drive all across that road. But you know, if you look at them, they would shoot us. So we tried to, if you saw the tank, you would look down, because we just saw that there is a lot of them, and their tanks, and they're running behind their tanks. Maybe they were running either toward that shop. At least anyway, there were lots of those Russians at those shops. Maybe they thought they would eat something, maybe they would steal something. Yeah, we don't have that shop there anymore, and we don't have water there, nor electricity, nor natural gas supply. And there are little children, little babies there in those basements. Sometimes it would happen that one little child started speaking in that basement with their very first words. And I don't even know whether that family managed to live. They were not relatives for us, but they left outdoors and said, now our child started speaking in that basement. And when shelling started, our child started saying, boo, boo. And even the child knew that now we have to hide in the basement. And I would like to tell you that there was also that rocket in the center of Dmitriev. And somebody said that it did not explode. If it would explode, then maybe half of the Dmitriev village would be destroyed, but it did not explode. There was just a big pit made by that rocket in the center of Demidov. There was that central shop and all that. And on the 8th of March, when we were moving, we were told that males are not let through. Children up to 18 years old are let through, but Russians don't let male through. So I went through, and my husband stayed there. And I went there because I got a text message, and my child is in Vyshhorod, and I had all the documents with me. So I contacted the volunteer supporters, and those volunteers helped. And I called. I didn't believe that the truth that my child was able to escape from there, because every day there was terrible shelling. And I would like to tell you that I just wanted to ask. I asked them to give the phone to my child to hear the truth, and I kept crying and smiling. You know, I spent the night there, sitting there, and my husband said, I don't know how I would escape, and if I cannot contact you, what would happen? And when we left, when we escaped, there were young guys and elders, and everybody could leave, but we were told that males cannot leave, that they would not be let through. But when we reached, we had to get that corridor, green corridor, at 10 a.m. Everybody kept waiting. We were gathering and waiting. And there were those people from the Red Cross. They told us, don't go on your own because it will be terrible. And we decided to go with other people. There was a lot of people gathered there, people with their children, and a lot of people. And also a lot of people stayed in the village club. They stayed there, and they say, we don't have any place to go. And they don't have any water there. I don't know how they survived there, especially that it's very cold there. We were in the basement. It's also cold there in the basement. We caught a cold. And people with little children, you know, it's terrible. But when we started moving, it was 20 past 10, and we just managed to leave. And when we started leaving, there were those Russian tanks. And, you know, I said, you know, if they don't let us through, we prayed God to get through. And when we reached their roadblock, their checkpoint, we were stopped, and they lined us up, and we looked down because they thought maybe if they don't like us, they will start shooting us, who knows. And that guy said, get back, get back. Why are you going to that side? Why are you going to that side? There is war. You have seen it all. Do you want to try more of it? That's what the Russian guy said. Get back. Of course, we did not get back. We just looked down, and we crossed, and we were held by Red Cross, and we crossed to this side. Thank God nobody was injured. So we crossed, and Red Cross people brought us to Lutish, to village of Lutish, and from Lutish I asked the driver to bring me to Vyshhorod, because I have my child in Vyshhorod, and that's how it went. Could you please tell us how you went from there? How it started, how it started and how I escaped. It all started on the 24th. I was with my girl at her place, and in the morning on social media there was information that the war started. We didn't see it that much. Just in the morning there was about 10 helicopters flying above our roof, and that's it. And telecommunications still worked. On the first 3 days it worked, but then in about 3 days, on the 27th, 28th of February, we saw a helicopter flying there and maybe launching some rocket, and after that there was no electricity, no communications, and also our phones got discharged, and I had no connection to my mother. So for about 1 week I had no connection. I could not call anybody, and we just stayed there. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. Then in 5 or 6 days we went to Demidov, village or town of Demidov, and on the way there we saw some broken equipment, broken vehicles. We just didn't know whose equipment was that, because they were completely burned. And for 3 days we went to Demidov because it was quieter there, we could sleep there. Then we went to Kazarovich to take our chattels to spend nights in Demidov. And then in Kazarovich there were Russians who just entered the village, and then they established a checkpoint, a roadblock there. When we tried to leave, they didn't let us through. They said, go back because there is no road, no way to Demidov. That's what they said. Sorry. And we went back to Kazarovich. We picked up all our clothes and came to Katerina's mother's place, and we wanted to pick her up, but she refused. About half an hour passed and we went back, and now on the main road there is an armed personnel carrier going, and about 20 soldiers going, and they entered houses to check whether people have left and so on. Then we wanted to leave, and we see a truck coming. We immediately started running away because the car stopped, and we started running, and the car tried to follow us, but we went into some courtyard, and then we left it. Was that the truck or car with soldiers? Yes, with soldiers. With Russian soldiers? Yes, with Russian military. Then we left that house because we were not allowed to spend the night there. I don't know why, but we were walking in the fields, through the fields in the nighttime. It was the most terrible to walk through the fields because mostly there we heard shooting there. But we managed to go. We reached Katerina's place. We spent the night there, and we woke up. And we wanted to go back, to try to go back. We started going along the streets, and we were stopped by the Russians. We didn't see them. They went out of the bush, so to say, and they put us to our knees, kneeling. And it just went that luckily there was not one normal person among them who let us get back. But they wanted to take our phones from us, but luckily we left our phones in Demidov. We wanted to recharge our phones in Demidov because there was a generator. What they told us when they made kneeling, they searched us. They searched us all across our body, so to say. They asked us for documents, but we did not have any documents with us, no phones with us, nothing. Luckily, there was one normal person among them. That person let us go. He said, "You'll not be able to get there, so get back to where you came from." And we started moving back there. And we got back, and next day I wanted to go home, but again, I was not allowed to go, and so we were staying with one guy at his place. Luckily, we spent 3 days there. Actually, we were not nobody for him, but we stayed there, and we were cooking on open fire and in a stove, and it was very scary to go to get some water. When we were going for water, we saw rockets flying above our heads. Thank you. Thank you for surviving. That's very important. If you have any questions, dear journalists, you're welcome. I know that in Demidov situation is Demidov is an example, one of the most complicated situations. How did volunteers contact you, and how you were helped to contact the volunteers? I know that there is some communication using volunteers. Yes, there are volunteers in the village council. They stay there in the village council, and at that time they were able to somehow bring humanitarian aid there, some bread and so on. But now I don't know what's happening there, whether those volunteers are there or not, because people are hungry there, you know. Since the 8th of March, I'm in Vyshgorod. I have been in Vyshgorod, and I called that friend, and she said, "It's terrible here. We have nothing to eat. Maybe we'll manage," she said, "to pass us some food from Vyshgorod." And also they have little children. It's not just about our friend, but and her children, but also other children, and it's impossible to pass anything there. And she said, you know, not somewhere it's possible to pass them parcels. I said I will try and find out whether it's possible to pass something there, but I just don't know whether they have any volunteers there or what's going on. I have my husband still staying there. He is there. I was told that he looks like a black American and an African there. He doesn't look like he used to look. You know, it's difficult to recognize him. And there, you have no direct connection. No, I cannot connect. I just call my friend, and he says, Alena, currently we'll try to recharge his phone because he just cannot contact me. My husband cannot contact me for 3 days. He called me once. He said, Alena, everything is fine. He said Russians are walking around the village and they will be distributing some humanitarian aid. I said, how would they distribute it? Where do they get it? Because they're hungry. They destroyed all our shops. How would they distribute humanitarian aid? After that, I haven't heard anything from my husband. What's happening there? I was not able to contact him for 3 days.
Thank you, Tim Judah from The Economist and Financial Times from London. When the Russians came into your village, did they try and explain what they were doing there? Did they give any instructions to you? I'll repeat that because I can see you didn't hear the beginning bit. Did they give you any? Did they tell you what they were doing there? Did they tell you they had come to liberate you, or what did they tell you that they were doing? Or maybe they didn't say anything to you. And secondly, do you think that anybody in your village was helping them?
Андрей? Это, да.
Look, yes, now everybody knows that there was some guy who helped them. The guy, I don't remember his last name. He told them about people who helped our military. There are people like territorial guys, no, or who? There was some guy who was doing some like reconnaissance, like there were 4 people, and then Russians started walking across the village, searching for who provided information. They were looking for a white van, and that white van was used by our reconnaissance guy to bring bread for our people. He saw what's going on there, and so they were looking for that white one. Is my understanding correct that our reconnaissance guy from the military helped our people, and those Russians were looking for that guy? Yes, they were looking for him. They were looking for him all across all streets. They entered every house looking for a white van. And they were looking who provides information about them, because a lot of tanks came to the village and they were shelled because somebody provided information. And they, as soon as they come to Demidov, somebody provides information about those Russians and they're shelled. And then they bring tanks there, and they are behind their tanks, and they were looking for people. I didn't see it, but I heard from somebody, not from that Pasha with the reconnaissance guy, but from some people that we have a prayer house there, and all those people were brought there, and they took phones from them. So the invaders took their phones from them. The invaders wanted to get phones from those people, but those people were hiding their phones because they used those phones to contact our military. For example, even there is a tank going, say, across Vyshgorod, our guys, our locals would provide information to our military, like so many tanks going there and what's going on in Dmitriev. And our military could not shell because there were still people there. If all the people would have left Dmitriev, it would be easier, but many people just cannot leave the village, and that's why it's difficult. Thank you, thank you.
And can you answer the question about whether the Russians tried to tell you what they were doing there? Did they try and tell you that you were being liberated? What did they say? Or maybe they didn't say anything.
Ні, ми з ними
No, we did not speak with them because we were afraid. They said if they look at us, they will shoot us. So we we looked at them from the distance, but we didn't speak with them, we didn't talk to them. We spoke with Russians, but they didn't do anything bad to us back then, but they asked about the dirty jacket. Why the dirty jacket? They were acting as marauders. They break into shops, food stores. They keep hostages. They capture people, and in the nighttime they would place people next to the food shop. They know there is a stand rack for bicycles, and they chained one person to that bike rack at 7 p.m. and at 7 a.m. And at 7 a.m. they released, unchained that person. Why did they chain that person there? What was the reason? Because that person was a bit drunk. And he started somehow approaching them and saying something to them. And on each street, they would brought fences and come there with tanks. And the main road is filled with tanks. They enter houses, they enter basements, and take all that conserved food from there. If the house is empty, they stay the night there, and they mostly stay in those houses. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Dear journalists, are there any more questions? Let's maybe let our guests go. Thank you very much for surviving. Stay strong, please stay strong. Dear journalists, I would like to remind you that you're welcome to monitor our announcements in the Telegram channel or our Facebook page. At the moment, we are developing our schedule for tomorrow, schedule of our briefings. So monitor our announcements, and we'll keep you informed about everything what's going on in our press center, in our media center. So I'd like to remind you again that here at the Media Center, Ukraine Media Center, you're welcome to work here. You're welcome to record your comments. You have Wi-Fi access and tea and coffee and whatever conveniences for your operation. Thank you for